1.2.3 The methods of electrification. We are discussing about methods of electrification, and in that one of the method is charging by a friction and how to charge by a friction. Let us discuss how to charge by a friction. Let us consider the glass rods. But how many glass rods you should consider? Let us consider the two glass rods, and these glass are rubbing with some material. What is the material with which the glass rods are rubbed? So one glass rod is rubbed with the wool, or another glass rod is rubbed with the silk. You can rub the two glass rods with either silk cloth or wool cloth. And these two glass rods, the glass rod 1 and the glass rod 2. If you bring the two glass rods are closer to each other, what happens? So when the two glass rods are rubbed with the silk and wool, after bringing the two glass rods are closer to each other, they start repelling. They start repel each other. The glass rod 1 repels the glass rod 2, and glass rod 2 it repels the glass rod 1. Now it's over. Now let us consider the two strands of wool or two pieces of silk cloth. Means let us consider how many strands of wools? The strands of two strands of wool, or you can consider as uh, two pieces two pieces of silk cloth. The two pieces of silk cloth. Now these two and two strands of woolen cloth is rubbed with glass rod, and one strand of wool is rubbed with a glass rod, and another strand of wool is rubbed with the glass rod. If you bring two strands of wool, this is wool 1 and this is wool 2. If two strands of wool, if you bring closer to each other, even they repel each other. Even they too also the repel. And similarly silk cloth 1. And one silk cloth is rubbed with a glass rod, and another silk cloth is rubbed with a glass rod. If this is silk cloth 1 and this is silk cloth 2. If you bring the silk cloth 2 closer to each other, if you bring the silk cloth closer to each other, what happens between them? Are they repel each other? Yes, they repel each other. If glass rod and wool, what happens between them? If the glass rod and wool, if they bring closer to each other, what happens between them? They will attract. They will attract each other. Even the glass rod and silk, if you bring close to each other, what happens between them? They attract each other. Now let us consider the two plastic rods. Let us consider the two plastic rods. So one plastic rod is rubbed with the cat's fur, and another also rubbed with the cat's fur. If one glass plastic rod and another plastic rod, if you arrange them very close to each other, what happens between them? They repel each other. Now with the plastic rod, if you bring the plastic rod and very close to the fur, what happens between them? Catch fur. They attract each other. They attract. Means the plastic rod attract with the catch fur. Let us consider the glass rod and plastic rod. So plastic rod always attracts the glass rod. Plastic rod always attracts the glass rod, but the plastic rod always repels the silk. It repels the silk, and also it repels the wool with which the glass rod is rubbed. But the plastic rod attracts the glass rod. The plastic rod it repels the silk and also wool with which the glass rod is rubbed. And this glass rod it repels the fur with which the plastic rod is rubbed. Next, in this process, what do you observe that? When two bodies are rubbed each other, this is body 1 and this is body 2. When these two bodies are rubbed each other, what happens between them? When two bodies are rubbed each other, what happens exactly between them? So here, when two bodies are rubbed, the electrons, these electrons, they transferred from one body to another body. These electrons they transfer from one body to another body. Means in this process, when two bodies are rubbed together, what are the particles which are transferred from one body to another body? The electrons are transferred from one body to another. Now here if we see that a substance, if we see a substance, if this substance having higher electron affinity, if this substance having higher electron affinity, what it gains? It gains the electrons. It gains the electrons. Means any body which is having the higher electron affinity, it gains the electrons and it becomes which charged body? It becomes totally the negatively charged body. If it gains the electrons, it becomes negatively charged body. Now, let us consider a body. Let's consider a body which is having the electron affinity less, which is having electron affinity less, means the electron affinity of this body is very less. Then what happens? The electrons of this body, and this body it loses the electrons. It loses electrons. When this body loses the electrons, and this body becomes the positively charged body. So in this method, when the bodies are charged by a friction, in this method, the bodies, this body and this body, body 1 and body 2, both are rubbed each other. The bodies get charged by friction by transfer of electrons from one body to another body. And one body get the positive charge and another body get the negative charge. Means unlike charges. Means by friction the two bodies get unlike charges, but those charges will be equal. Means the first body get 10 positive charges and second body also get 10 negative charges. Consider the glass rod. When glass rod is rubbed with the silk cloth, when they're rubbed with silk cloth, what is the charge of the glass rod? The glass rod get positively charged and the silk cloth get the negatively charged.